Hello, this is Clarence Moye with Awards Daily here with Daniel Goldfarb and Chris Kaiser. Am I doing that right? That's right, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. Here, the creators and showrunner of Julia, which is on HBO Max. Welcome.
thank you. Nice to
Great to
meet you.
meet you. So Julia, obviously, as you can see from my kitchen, is having a bit of a moment right now with your series plus the documentary that came out earlier. Why do you think that is? Whoever
You
would
want,
like to go
you
first.
want to do that one first, Daniel?
You can go first, Chris.
Oh, okay. Look, I think I think we think that look, Julia is a perennial. She's like a hardy perennial. The things she represents, the things she tells us, don't go out of style. The idea that you can do what you want to do, be who you want to be, that with a combination of guilelessness and passion, that she turned herself into something and set an example. I mean, first in the 1960s for women, of course, who charted their own course, but really for all people to find something that they love in life and follow it up. It can be food, but it can be anything else. That message never goes away. And that she's a little bit cyclical, that she comes and goes when we need her. And so Julia was, a decade and a half ago or something like that. Her programs before that were about 15 years before that. I think the existence of this project and that project are coincidental and not coincidental. They're both they both started many, many years ago with no conversation. We had no idea whether they would come out at the same time. The pandemic changed everything. And yet, I think it's predictable that every so often the world needs a dose of Julia, and she comes back. And the thing that made us and Kimberly Carver, who originally suggested the idea, say, yes, we've got to do this show. I'm sure it's the same thing that led the producers of that documentary. And I imagine 20 years from now, somebody else again will say, what about Julia? What does she have to say to us right now?
Daniel, what about you?
I mean, yes, I think there is a timeless, unsinkable quality to Julia. And then, of course, I mean, we've been working on this for years, and we were shut down a day before filming was supposed to begin, Friday the 13th, 2020. We were shut down an hour before our table read in Boston. And so we were thinking about all of these ideas and all of these thoughts before everybody was getting sourdough starter kits at home and baking and cooking and sort of reconnecting with food, giving you a sense of self and a sense of adventure and a sense of joy. So the timing of in a weird way, the delay helped us for a lot of reasons. We ended up solidifying the perfect cast, and it feels like the idea is more timely than ever. And it's such a dark moment we're living through, and there's something about Julia's optimism and kindness and sense of, even though she was an extraordinary individual, she had an extraordinary community, and it was good people being good to each other and lifting each other up to achieve something great. And again, also, they had no idea that 60 years later, people would still be talking about Julia Child and the French Chef. There was, as Chris said, there was a guilelessness to her. She wasn't in it for fame. She was a teacher at heart, and she had something to teach us, not just about cooking, but about how to live your life. And that never goes away.
Yeah, absolutely. I have to say, within the very first moments of the pilot of Julia, she is preparing that fantastic saumoniere. And I've seen it done several times. I've never had it before, but I was on vacation a couple of months ago, and I had the opportunity. It was on the menu. I could not pass it up. It was like Julia was speaking to me and said, "You must have this." The best fish I have ever had, hands down. And I cannot wait. I'm going to go travel back to that same spot because I can't find it anywhere else and have it again because it is so good. Now, I'm not going
to. It's Sarah Lancashire's favorite dish. She shared
wow.
that with Julia. Yeah.
Where is it, by the way? Where'd you go?
It was actually at a restaurant and a resort in Disney World, believe it or not. It's a French restaurant there, which was very, very, very good. I'm not brave enough. She's not yelling in my ear, so I'm not cooking it yet, but I'm sampling it, which I think she would be happy with. Daniel, how did Julia speak to you to instill this project within you?
I mean, so as Chris mentioned earlier, it was Kimberly Carver's idea, but I have been a foodie my whole life. I love cooking. I love going to restaurants. I love talking about food. The first pilot I ever wrote was sort of loosely inspired by Ruth Reichel, about a restaurant critic who reviews restaurants in disguise. So I've always wanted to do something food related. My mother wrote a cookbook when I was a kid. I grew up eating delicious food. So when I got to sit with Kimberly and talk about how I would do a show about Julia, it really was a dream come true in kind of like the bigger sense, like to get to do a food show. And I knew a little bit about Julia, and I had seen Julia and Julia, and I'd seen, Dan Aykroyd do Julia on Saturday Night Live, and I'd seen Julia herself on David Letterman, but I was by no means a Julia expert. And then when Kimberly decided to move forward with me, I realized I got the Mount Everest of food projects. So then I kind of immersed myself in Julia. And I said this when we were pitching it, I actually just I brought my laptop to the kitchen. I watched seasons worth of The French Chef, and I started making the recipes along with Julia and cooking. And she's just the best company in the world. And that's ultimately what we want the show to be, good company. And it was, and then luckily Chris came on board and joined me, and here we are today.
Chris, what kind of research inferred this project? What were some of the best sources of inspiration and information that made this so realistic?
Well, there's a lot of stuff out there about Julia. It's one of the advantages that we had. As Daniel said, the first and greatest resource in some ways is all of those years of The French Chef. So you can watch and do the thing that we're talking about. There are a bunch of books about her, the famous ones that were written before, but also The French Chef in America, written by Alex Prudhomme, her nephew, about her life in the United States and making The French Chef. There are the letters that she wrote to Avis Devoto, the letters that Paul and his brother Charlie wrote to each other. There's plenty of stuff, as James said. Also, all the videotape of her on Letterman and every other one of those appearances that she made on television. So we had more than enough to go on. Having said that, and we've said this to people in general, that show is an active imagination as much as anything. We use that stuff to make sure that we're true to the characters, not just Julia, but all the amazing people who surrounded her. And then we allowed ourselves to tell a version, as Daniel and I call it, the Amadeus version of the story, because Peter Schaffer, who wrote that amazing play about Mozart and Salieri, said, of course, no one was in those rooms, those private rooms, but I can imagine what must have happened knowing what I know about them, and I stand by it. And we do the same thing with Julia. It's a life that was led in public in part, but in private enough and not so famous that every instant of it is recorded. So it gave us the leeway between those moments to invent things, and invent things that for us in television meant that we could tell a story that meant something in 2022. So it was a great balance for us. There's always something to go back to and say, did we get this right? And plenty of people to tell us if we get it wrong. But much of the work is done in the spaces between what's known.
I want to talk about balance, actually. That's actually a great segue into my next question. This series dances the line between comic material and very dramatic material. Whoever feels most adept at answering this question, how do you achieve that balance?
I think we just try and be as true to the characters as possible. Something that is wonderful, just going back to the research, if you read the letters or see her talk show appearances, is that Julia is funny. She has a great sense of humor. She's in on the joke. She loved language. She loved wit. So did Paul. So did Avis. They used humor to sort of communicate intellectual ideas and thoughts. So we knew we had that. We had that as part of the fabric of the show. And we knew we wanted to tell a very human scale show and a very sincere show where the dramas were small, but for the characters going through them, they weren't so small. And I think we just tried. I mean, this is how I write my plays, and I've worked with Chris before when I worked on his show Tyrant, that we just tried to be true to the story and true to the character and let that guide us. And Chris is really funny and I'm funny, and we filled the room with a wonderful writer's room where everyone was witty and funny. and we were telling the story of witty, funny people. So that could be part of the fabric of the show. But when, when the characters have obstacles, we wanted to play it for real. And we wanted them to feel things deeply. And we didn't shy away from that because for whatever reason, someone had categorized us as a comedy or a drama. We just decided to let the characters guide us.
That makes sense. Chris, you were blessed with this amazing cast of fantastic actors. And as you watch the series, it does feel like Sarah, David, Bebe, they're all lifelong friends. I mean, it looks on the series like they're all lifelong friends as they are in the show. How much rehearsal time did you have for them to help sort of build those relationships? Like, I know David and Bebe obviously knew each other from Frasier, have worked, previously together, but I don't know that they knew Sarah that well. So how did they build those bonds?
They're just really good actors, to be honest with you, because there's almost no rehearsal time.
Oh, wow.
And for the pilot, we were able to spend a few days with Charles McDougall, who is the amazing director who took us through the first 2 episodes of the first season. A few days here and there is really all, not enough to really create a lifelong friendship or the simulation of a lifelong friendship. It's all the acting. And I don't mean it's acting that they don't feel that way, because the cast gets along very well together and they love each other. And I think one of the things that's generally true is, and Daniel and I have both worked on shows that have a darkness at their heart or a lightness at their heart. And the character of the company often parallels that. This is a fun show to make. And the stories make you feel good. And I think the cast generally feels good doing them. So there's a warm quality to everything that goes on. But aside from Bebe and David, who, by the way, were not cast to be partners in this show. We did not know it. David was not available to play the part when we cast Bebe. Then the pandemic made him available. So although David had always been our prototype for the part. So we didn't ever decide to put people together who had worked together before. That just happened. They met Sarah for the first time. They had a few days with her. Fiona Glasgow, whose I think relationship with Sarah feels as lived in as could possibly be, met them all for the first time when she arrived in Boston. As Daniel said, we gathered together in March of 2020, spent a day and a half together and sent everybody home. We came back 6 months later. We had just a few days to get going again because we were under all of this pressure now that the delay had happened to get going on the pilot. And so we just threw everyone in. And so, for example, the very first scene that was shot was the scene in the kitchen in Cambridge, the second scene of the first episode, where Julia makes an omelet for Paul. Daniel talks about this a lot, that being in that room, we were able to be in the room, although at a distance with our masks on and all of that, because we were still during the pandemic. You felt as if you were in the child's home, that they had entered those characters and become them in a way that all great actors do in all great parts or series that succeed. We just got lucky. It's a little bit of a miracle. You never know. And it happened to happen for us.
Yeah.
We also cast a lot of actors that started off in the theater and that all took their jobs very seriously. Like everyone came, and starting first and foremost with Sarah, but no one called line. Everyone was letter perfect. Everyone, because they were playing real people for the most part, they were very invested in doing them justice. I think also because we were working in such strange times and the show is so hopeful and optimistic and aspirational, all of that, and the child's were theatrical. So the kind of theatrical backgrounds of all of our cast, I think really helped us and helped the show feel like it had a texture and a sort of history. I mean, I remember, Chris, when Phil, who edited our first 2 episodes, he was looking at the dailies and he couldn't believe the actors had just met. He was like, this never, so just exactly what you're saying. There was some magic and we just got really lucky.
And as I said, by the way, because it was during the pandemic, there was no socializing, right?
Yeah,
we were not allowed to be together. So you just showed up to do your job and did the scene. But all of the stuff that normally goes on with a company, which is you go out to dinners together, you're on location, you get to know each other as a family, that had to happen on camera.
And they didn't even get the chance to sit down and enjoy a meal together? That's insane.
Ever. Not once during the entire filming of the pilot, and not till late in the first season outside were we able to be together.
Yeah, because you'd think for a project like this, sitting down and enjoying a very nice meal together would be sort of table stakes. So I want to talk a little bit about Brittany Bradford, who plays Alice in the show, and her casting. You know, obviously she's a Black actress, and her casting is representative of an amalgamation of different people that worked at that studio who were white. Talk to me about casting her and sort of what that brings to the material.
So yes, Alice is based on a few different people. A number of them were not white. When we did our research, we learned, I mean, yes, the woman who produced Julia's show originally, Ruth Lockwood, was white,
Right.
but she was very different than Alice. You know, she was Julia's age. It was a very different idea of the character. So as we were sort of conceiving Alice, we also learned that there was a young Black woman producer at WGBH. She produced some shows later in the 60s. We also discovered Madeline Anderson, who was the first Black female documentary filmmaker. She actually shows up in episode 7 of the show and has a meeting with Russ, and she became a superstar at WNET and an executive producer of Sesame Street. So we knew that there were Alices out there, and it just felt like it was a way of sort of expanding the scope of the show, of how all these women sort of help each other through the prism of Julia, that there's something about Julia that sort of brings out the best in everyone. And it felt like a way to expand the world of the show, both for today and actually honor a piece of history that is forgotten, but is actually true.
Yeah, it's a fantastic choice, and she is wonderful in the role.
Yeah,
and
she's
again,
amazing.
blessed with this amazing magic cast.
Yeah.
It's quite
He just did this
insane.
play, The Wedding Band by Alice Childress at Theater for a New Audience, playing a character named Julia, and she was unbelievable. So
Wow.
we're very lucky to have her.
One of the things that happened for us is a little bit like, I think the Gilded Age had the same thing, is the theater was down during the first season, most of the first season. And so we had, as a first season show that might not normally attract people yet to play smaller parts, we were able to offer something that didn't exist in the world, a chance to actually do your job during the pandemic, and work with Sarah and David and Bibi also, which I think is part of the reason why people came aboard. But the unfortunate moment in time was a little lucky for us in a weird way.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the cast of the Gilded Age and Julia can just have a Tony off at this point. So many winners.
See,
Which
10 days who wins, right, or whatever.
Yeah, it's insane. I want to talk a little bit about San Francisco, those sequences, and the introduction of James Beard, the handling of the gay material, and the drag sequence, which I thought was hilarious and heartwarming, and you know, seeing her reaction to a drag performer performing as Julia Child, starting to understand her impact on the world a little bit differently than perhaps she had before. Talk to me about including that sequence, Dan.
I mean, that's really big. We knew a lot about that already, by the way. We did not make that up out of whole cloth. We knew, first of all, that that almost immediately that Julia became a presence in the drag community, that counterculture accepted Julia Child almost as quickly or more quickly than the culture itself. And so we immediately, in hearing that, decided very early on that we were going to go to San Francisco and do a version of that story. We also know from Julia's letters and what's reported that she was complicated, as Paul was, in her relationship to the gay community. She was casually homophobic. At the same time, James Beard was maybe one of her closest friends. So the way in which she both embraces him and pushes him away is based on her fickle qualities of refusing to be categorized and be consistent. She was good about things and then not so good. And so we wanted to tell a story that captured both of those sides of her and Paul's, which is that the aversion and the attraction, the idea that she was judgmental and at the same time embraced everyone. We hope to do in as non-pedantic a way, that's not a very good word, as possible. And so the introduction of James and the drag sequence and her reaction to it was all all part of that. And Chris Clemenson, who plays James Beard, is so also, we were so lucky to get him because he captures both the extraordinary power of James Beard and his self-loathing at the same time, which is also well documented.
Yeah, very powerful, very poignant sequences. And she famously did a complete 180 on her earlier views on homosexuality later in life, and became a staunch advocate for AIDS research, which was pretty amazing. And I hope to see that in Julia's season 8 or 10. Speaking of future seasons, I know that you were just greenlit in the beginning of the month for a second season on HBO Max. So congratulations for that.
Thank you.
What are some of the things that you would like to explore in her life within, the confines of another season?
I mean, we just want to continue where we left off, but for example, because of the pandemic, we in season 1 weren't able to really delve into her relationship with Simca. We had wanted to go to France in the first season and we were unable to. And we have Isabella Rossellini, and she's so wonderful. And she was sort of stuck doing a bunch of really fun phone calls, but phone calls nonetheless. So we want to get them in a room together, and we want to get them cooking. And so we're going to go to France. That's something we're really excited about. And then we want to just explore, the first season is a first season about a first season. And now we've learned actually in the first season that slowing the story down and telling human scale stories and intimate stories is really, I think, when the show is at its best. So we want to kind of continue in that way and sort of explore the second season of The French Chef and what happens as Julia really becomes a bona fide television celebrity, and how she changes educational television and the world without even really I don't know if she doesn't know it, but she's definitely not doing it for that reason. Right. But the thing that we tease at the end of the first season, which is Julia and Paul going to France, is something that we are going to move forward with. So we're excited for that.
Excellent. Well, let me know if you need another extra. Happy to stand in France. Daniel Goldfarb, Chris Kaiser, thank you so much for the time. That's all I had for you. Love the series, and congratulations. And I can't wait for season 2.
Thank you so much.
Take care.
Bye.